2 problems and answers that comes from yesterday as well. And then another teacher is going to uh, do some more, go over some more material on W3 schools. And then, yeah, that's for today. So, to my understanding, the only homework you guys had was to do the Python 2 problems. So I'm going to hand it over to the teacher to go over answers with you guys. And if you have any questions, you can put it in the question and answer, and then the teacher will get to it.
Okay, I'll be going over the Python 2 answers. Let me just share my screen real quick. Okay. Great. So we're going to start with question number 1. And this one gives us a piece of code, and it asks us, 9 will basically output 9. So we have A equals 7, B 3, C equals 5, and D equals 1. And so we need a combination of those variables to equal 9. And so if we look at the correct answer, we can see that output is equal to A plus D times 2. And so if you remember, we always do multiplication and division before subtraction and addition. So first we would do D times 2. Since D is equal to 1, 1 times 2 is equal to 2. So A plus 2, or 7 plus 2, is equal to 9. So this first be the correct answer. Okay. Next, we have question 2. It gives us 2 lists that have same contents, and then it has a bunch of print statements. We need to find out what the result is. And so the correct answer is the last choice. It's true, false, false, false. See that L1 and L2 have the same contents, but if we put out L1 is not L2, that's going to be true, because they don't point to the same object. Just because the contents are the same just doesn't mean that the two variables are actually the same. Think of it as like a box. There's 2 different boxes, and they both have the same identical boxes. But just because they have the same things doesn't mean that they're identical to each other. So since L1 is not L2, that's going to print out true. And then we have L1 is not equal to L2. And the difference between is and equals is actually checking for the actual reference to the object itself. So if you think about it with the box example, is looking at the box itself, while equals or not equals is looking at the inside the box. And so that means that L1 is not equal to L2 is false, because the contents of the 2 lists are actually the same. But then 5, and that has L1 is equal to L2, which means that the 2 variables are now going to be equal to each other, which means that they're going to be referencing the same object. And that means that L1 is not L2, going to be false, because now the 2 boxes are the same. Finally, we have L1 is not equal to L2. And again, that's going to be because the contents in each variable is the same. So the correct answer is true, false, false, false. Next, we have this piece of Python code, and and so we're basically printing out a variable result in a string of boolean 1 plus float 10 divided by float 2. So remember that division will come before addition. So first we would do the float 10 divided by float 2. And since it's float, it needs to be a decimal. So float is actually going to be 10.0 divided by 2.0, and that's going to be equal to 5.0. And boolean 1, boolean 1 is 1. So if you have a boolean value and you're trying to if you're converting that to a number, boolean true will always be 1 and boolean false will always be 0. So basically this is just 1 plus 5.0, and that is going to be 6.0. So 6.0, the first one, is the correct answer. Next we have we need which of the lines will print out capital A to the console. We can see that we have the variable b, and that's equal to banana. And so the first option, b3 plus b5, is correct, because remember that the index number always starts from 0. So b would be 0, a is 1, n is 2, a is 3, 4, n is 4, and 5 is a. 3 plus b5, it's just going to be a plus a, so that would print out a. We can also do 1 plus 5, because remember that b is 0, a is 1. And if we did a plus a, that's also a. We can plus 2, because that would mean we're doing a plus n, and that is not equal to a. And then we would do 1 plus 3, and that would also be a plus a. So the thing to remember about this question is that the index numbers always start from 0, not 1. Next, we have this question. And the answer to this question is 9. And I would do this step by step. So first I'll do the multiplication, addition, and exponents. And so first we have 6 divided, or 2 slashes and a 4. And this basically means that we're just going to get a division. So 6 divided by 4. 4 goes into 6 only once. So 6 slash 4 is just going to be equal to 1. So it's 1 mod 5. And these double asterisks or double multiplication signs means that we're doing an exponent. So that means it's going to be 2 to the power of 3, and that's going to be equal to 8. So 1 plus 8 minus, and 2 3 is going to be equal to 0, because 3 is greater than 2, so it doesn't go into 2. And 3 doesn't go into 2 in one time. So it's going to be 1 mod 5 plus 8 minus 0. 1 mod 5 is just 1, because if you were to do 1 divided by 5, the remainder would be 1, because 5 is greater than 1. So 1 plus 8 minus 0 is just 1 plus 8, and that's why the correct answer is 9. Next, we have this code, and it's asking us to print the result. And so in this case, this sort of caret symbol or the or what we normally think of as the exponent is not actually the exponent. It's going to be the XOR operator. And as this explanation says, it means that both bits are the same. If both bits are the same, then it's 0. If both bits are different, then it's 1. We have V1 equals 1, V2 equals 0. And V1 is going to be equal to 1 XOR 0. And since those two values are different, it's going to be true. And V1 is going to be equal to 1. Then we're going to do V2 is equal to V1 XOR V2. And so V1, remember, is 1, and XOR V2 is 0. And since they're different, it's going to be 1. And finally, we have V1 is equal to V1 XOR V2. And from lines 3 and 4, we can see that both of those variables are now going to be equal to 1. But remember that the XOR, it's only equal to 1 if both variables are different. Both V1 and V2 are equal to 1, it's going to be 0. So the correct answer is 0. Now we have a piece of code, and we have to choose the expression that evaluates to 2. So bool A, basically, if it's true, remember that if it's true, it's always going to be equal to 1. And since this is a float, it's going to, and so we have two truths, and if you add them together, and convert that into an int, it's basically going to be 2. So the second choice is not correct because it would just be equal to 1. Or this would actually just be equal to a Boolean value. The third would just be equal to a string value. And this one would actually convert this float into like another number, and that's why it would not be true. Next, we have question 8. And this one is a little confusing to look at, but we have a code and we have to see which command invocation will output the sentence, the average for Durga is 20.00. And we can see that the correct answer is py test.py Durga 10, 20, 30. And so I think the best explanation for this is in the this explanation part right here. And it says, by using the argv variable present in the sys module, access command line arguments, argv0 represents the name of the file. In the above code, this curly brackets with the 0 inside will be replaced by argv1, which is nothing but Durga. And so that basically means that the curly bracket is going to be replaced by argv1. And so in this case, argv1 is just going to be equal to Durga because you can think of this as a list. So the first element is not going to be py actually. The first element is going to be test.py. So test.py is argv0, Durga is argv1, argv2, and so on. And what this means, the brackets with the 1:.2f, basically means that we're going to be simplifying the value to 2 decimal places. So what we're going to do is we're going to do this part right here, the sum divided by the length of the array minus. And so in this case, sorry, give me 1 second. Okay, so the sum is just going to be the sum of these three numbers, 10 plus 20 plus 30, and that's going to be equal to 60, right? And we need to divide it by the length of ARGV. Remember that the ARGV list is this entire line except for PY. So test erga 10, 20, 30, that's a total of 5 elements. Minus 2 is 3. So we have 60 divided by 3. And remember that we're doing the format of 2 decimal places at the end. So instead of just leaving it as 20, we need to convert it to a float with the 2 decimal places at the end. If that answer is a little, put it in question and answer, and I can try to go over it at the end. Okay. Question 9 asks for which expression would evaluate to 2. The correct answer is 22 mod 5. And so mod basically means that we're going to divide the two numbers and get the remainder. So 5 basically goes into 22 for a total of 4 times, right? Because 5 times is equal to 20. And since at that point we can't divide in whole numbers anymore, the remainder will be 2. Next, we have question 10, which says, which expressions are of type string? We have variables A and B, and they're both equal to a string. They're both strings. And the first choice is correct because if we get a string and multiply 2, it basically means that there's just going to be 2 of the strings together. The second choice is also correct because if we add the 2 together, it's just going to be adding the 2 strings together. So it's going to be 5, 2. Remember that it's not going to be 7 because the 2 variables are strings. Strings, we can't subtract them or multiply them together. So the times and plus, the times 2 and the plus are the only ones that are going to be correct. You can see that the other 2 get a type error. Next, we have a piece of code, and it asks which line of the code assigns class list to X. So basically, we just which part of the variable t is a list, and we can see that the first element is a list with 2 values, 10 and 20. The second element is an int, 10, and the element is a Boolean false. So the only list is the first element. So we're going to get the first element of t, and remember that the index number for the first element is, so it's going to be the second choice. Okay, for it's the 12 question from SYS module by using which variable we can access command line argument. This one I think is just memorization. So just remember that by using the ARGV variable present in the SYS module, we can access command line arguments. So this one is just memorization. And then we have question 13 that says, which of the following code prints Durga to the console? So remember that all of them have the from SYS import ARGS. And remember that in the previous problem, I said that the PY is not included as an element. So the first element in the ARGS array is going to be test.py. So Durga is going to be the second element, means that it has an index number of 1. So remember that up here, it says the ARGV variable is present in the SYS module. So immediately we can take off the first and second choice because importing ARGV is importing ARGS. And so we can choose between the third and the fourth choice. And the fourth choice is correct because Durga has an index number of 1, since test.py has an index number of 0. Next, we have question 14, and it gives us a piece of code and asks what the result will be. And so the correct answer is false, true. And remember that is going to check like whether the boxes are identical, while the equal is going to check whether the contents are identical. And so line 2 of this piece of the code is just B is just to the contents of list. And so since B and the list variable are not pointing to the same object, the statement is going to be false. But since the two contents are the same, both of them are with 7, 8, 9. Since the contents are the same, the second print statement is going to be true. Correct answer is false, true. The next question is asking a script that asks the user for a value where the value must be used as a whole number even if the user inputs a decimal number. So the choices. This first one is incorrect because remember that it needs to be used as a whole number. So if the user were to input a decimal value for the first, it would still be equal to a decimal value. The second choice is correct because it's taking the input in as a decimal value first, and then it's converting it to an integer. So that is correct, and it meets the whole number requirement. The third answer is correct because it's not converting it to a whole number, it's just converting it to string. And the last choice is also incorrect because it's just leaving it as a decimal number and not converting it to a whole number. Next, we have question 16. And it gives us a bunch of print statements and asks what the result is. And the correct answer is going to be true, false, true, false, true. Oops, okay. So true, false, true, false, true. So first we have not 0, and not basically means we're going to get the opposite. So the not of 0 is false, remember? So the opposite of false is true, right? And not 10. And And 10 is going to be equal to true, but since we're getting the opposite, it's going to be false. Next, we have not with quotation marks. And since the quotation marks are nothing inside, it's going to be equal to false. But since we're getting the opposite, it's going to be true. Next, we have a similar statement, except this time there's a string. This time there's a string actually inside the quotation marks, which means that it's going to be true, but since we're getting the opposite, false. And the opposite of none will basically means false. So since we're getting the opposite of false, it's going to be true. So the correct answer is true, false, true, false, true. I think this one is also memorization in the sense that you need to know like what is true and what is false, even when it's not a Boolean value. But the correct answer is true, false, true, false, true. The next question asks for us to choose all the values. And the first choice says that true plus 1 evaluates to 2. Remember that I said true and true as a number is 1, so 1 is true. So 1 plus 1 will be equal to 2, and that's correct. Next, we have the second choice, and that says 5 plus false evaluates to false. And that's actually wrong because false is equal to 0. And since we're adding 5 plus false, it's the same as adding 5 plus 0. And so the output would actually be 5. Next, we have true and false evaluates to false. And remember that for the AND operator of the both things need to be true for the output to be true. And since one is true and one is false, the whole AND operation is going to be false. The next choice is false because we have a set of quotation marks. And the quotation marks means that this is actually a string and not a Boolean. And lastly, we have the last choice, which says or false evaluates to false. And so the OR is different from the AND operator because the OR operator says that only one of the choices or one of the two things have to be true. So it can be true or false or true or true or true. And any one of those three combinations will be equal. So basically, what's good to remember is that an OR operation will only be false if both sides are false. Next, we have question 8. This is similar to one of the other questions we did before. We see that there's two variables and they both have the same exact contents. But remember that the is checks to see if they both point to the same object. And since, remember, the boxes are not the same box, L1 is L2 is actually going to be false, but the contents are the same. They both have Sunny, Bunny, Chinny, Vinny. And since the contents are the same, if you do equals equals, it's going to be true. And then in line 5, we can see that the two variables are now being equal to each other, which means that point to the same object. So you can think of it as like now the two boxes are just completely identical. That the is and the equals equals are both going to be true. Next, we have a piece of code, and we have to find the result of the code. So this one, the answer is test.py because the argv array is going to be equal to test.py soft. And remember that the first element in the arg array is going to be equal to test.py. Yeah, that's basically all you need to know. So the correct answer is going to be test.py. Next, we have code, and we have to find what modifications should be done to get the most precise output. So this part is the most important part, the one that says the most precise output. And so the correct answer is going to be XXX should be replaced with float and YYY should be replaced with float. And so float generally will produce a more precise output, especially when we're dealing with fractions or division, because if you use int, it'll just be a whole number. while float will give you like a precise decimal number. For example, if you were to do like the int version of pi, it would just be 3, right? It's not very accurate. But if we were to do the float version, it would be like the 3.14159, and that's a lot more accurate in terms of value. So the correct answer is to replace both with float. The next question gives us a piece of code and needs to find what the result is. And the correct answer is a memory error thrown at runtime. So why is there a memory error? We can see that in the for loop, every single time the for loop is run, we're going to add a new letter to the for loop, right? So we can think of it like first A, B, C, D. And the first time it's run, it's going to be A, B, C, D, and a capital A at the end, and then a capital B, a capital C as the for loop keeps on going. And since the for loop keeps on going forever, it's never going to stop. So there's going to be a memory error. So this one asks for a line that will assign 9 to a variable. And we can see that I'll just go through each of the choices. So the first one says result is equal to length of s.strip. And what strip does is it just removes the white space or all the spaces from the sides. But since there's no spaces on the sides, the length is just going to be equal to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. It's just going to be equal to 10. So basically, this will actually the s variable in any way. It'll just get the length of the s variable. So this will be equal to 10. The next one is length of s dot replace every space for just an empty string. It's going to replace the space for empty string. And so if we were to do this one on the s variable, you would replace the space and soft with, you would just take it out basically. And that means that there's one less character. So the length would be 10 minus 1 is equal to 9. The third option is incorrect because we're just getting the length of Durgasoft, and that's 10. And the fourth and fifth one are also incorrect because there's nothing on the sides of the string for it to remove the white space. Okay. Question 23 says, which of the following string declarations spans more than one line and considers white space properly when the string is printed to the console? So basically what you need to remember about a multi-line string variable is you need 3 different quotation marks. And since the only one that does that correctly is the first choice, the correct answer is going to be the first choice. The explanation says, multi-line string literals should be enclosed within triple quotes. And the first choice is the only one that uses triple. Okay. Question 24. And it says, which of the following code can be used for this requirement that's written in the question up here? Okay. Answer is the third option. Basically, first, second, and fourth option are all wrong because we're not actually getting the user's input. The only way to get the user's input and put is to use the input function, and the only one that uses the input function is the third choice. As the explanation says, use the input function to read input from the keyboard. The next question says, in the following cases, we will get the class int as output. So we basically need to see what data type each variable x is. And so in this, in the first choice, 47 has quotation marks around it, which means that x is actually going to be equal to a string. The second one is correct because we're doing 2 to the power of 2 to the power of 2, and that's basically going to be equal to 8, and that's a string. The third one is incorrect because we have the j, which is going to be a data type called a complex data type. And the last one is also incorrect because it has a decimal, which means that it's a float. So the only one that's an int variable is the second option. Next, we have question 26, which considers this code. First, we should do the division and the exponents before the addition and subtraction. 3 divided by 3 is equal to 1, and 3 for Python is going to be 3 to the power of 3, and that's going to be equal to 20. So 1 plus 27 minus 3 is plus 24, and 1 plus 24 is equal to 25. But notice how the correct answer is 25.0, and that's because we have this divide right here. And even though the answer is a whole number, since we're doing divide, it's actually going to be 1.0, which is going to make the final output, so 25.0. Which of the following statements are valid? So remember that false is 0 and true is 1. So if we look at the first 0 plus 5 minus 1 plus 35 divided or slash 4. And that basically means we're getting the whole number of 35 divided by 4. And that's actually going to be equal to 8. So 0 plus 5 minus 1 plus 8 is going to be 5 minus 1 plus 8, or 4 plus 8, which is going to be equal to 12. Next, we have the second option. And the second option, and that's basically going to be 7 divided by 2 plus false or true plus 9 mod 3. So 7 divided by 2 is going to be 3 plus false or true. Remember that for a OR op, only one of the two sides has to be true. And since we do have a true, it's going to be, the whole operation is going to be true. And remember that true is 1. So 3.5 plus 1. And 9.3 is going to be 0 because 3 goes into 9 exactly 3 times. So that basically means 3.5 plus 1 plus 0. And that's going to be equal to 4.5. The third option is incorrect because we're adding an int and a float. And if you add an int and a float, the answer is always going to be a float. And we also have last option is also incorrect because we actually can use single quotes simultaneously. And also, like the single quotes that you use like as an apostrophe and doesn't really count as like the indicator of a, and so since this one has the double quotes at the end of the entire string, it's going to be true. So it won't cause an error. And then we have, it says if we enter 10 and 10.0 individually for each run, what is the output? And so the correct answer is string, because every time we use the input function, type of the input is always going to be equal to a string. So as the explanation says, the input function always returns string type only. So even if we end a 10 or 10.0, it's always going to be 10 as a string and 10 as a string. Next, we have this code that gives us a bunch of lines, and the correct answer is false, true, false. And so the first one, it has 10 is equal to 10, and 20 is not equal to 20. And remember that for the AND operator, both sides have to be true. And the left side is true, but the right side is false. The whole operation is going to be false, and that's why false is printed out. Next, we have the second line, which thing, but instead of and, we have or. And remember that or, only one side has to true. And since the left side is true and the right side is false, true or false, and that's going to be equal to true. And for the third line, we have not 10 is equal to 10. And since 10 is equal to 10 is actually true, but not, we're going to get the opposite. So the not of true is equal to false. So the correct answer is false, true, false. Next, we have a piece of code, and we have to see how we can variable so that it will become equal to 16. So if we look in line 1, x is equal to 3. Line 2, x is equal to x plus. So after line 2, the value of x is going to be equal to 4, which means that we basically need to multiply it by 4 to get it to equal 16. So the first line is incorrect because it means we're basically doing x is equal to x times 2, and 4 times 2 is 8, equal to 16. And then we have the second choice, which says x is equal to x minus 2, and that would print out 2, actually. And then we have this one, the third option, which says x to the power, x is equal to x to the power of 2. And this one works because if we do 4 to the power of 2, that's equal to 4 times 4, which is equal to 16. This one is incorrect because it's x equals x plus 2, and that would be equal to 6. Okay. Question, it says, which expression evaluates to 4? So the second choice is the correct answer because 7 mod 2 is equal to 1 because 2 goes into 7 3 times, but we still have 1 left over. So 7 mod 2 is equal to 1 plus 3 is equal to 4. Remember that we need to do the mod before we do addition or subtraction. So the second choice is correct because 1 plus 4. Question 32, it says, it's similar to the one we did earlier. This time, instead of just input and type, we have this eval function. And what eval does is it converts the string type to it automatically converts it to the corresponding type. Earlier, how the input function will always return a string. Eval function will actually turn it back into its original data type. So if we input 10, that would actually be an integer, right? Because it's a whole number. And 10.0 would be a float because it has a decimal. And remember that it's not a string. It's not string like it because we have the eval function. Next, we have, in which of the following cases true will be printed to the console? So the first option is correct because we're looking for the letter R in the string Durga. And since the letter R is in the string Durga, this is going to be equal to true. And when we print it out, it's going to be equal to true. This option is correct because we're looking for the is in this entire sentence. And you might think that it's false because the is in capitalized. But we can see that the is also at the end or of this. So this is true because we can see the is in lowercase in the this in this word. That was kind of confusing to say. We can see that the lowercase is in this string. We have which code inserted at line 1 will print 20 to the has 15 as count value from the console. Sorry. So basically what this question is saying is that if we input 15, we want the code to print out 20. And so the first answer choice is incorrect because if we were to get 15 as a float, then the final output that we would print out would be a float as well. So instead of 20, it would print out 20.0, and that's false. The second one is correct as if we got it as an integer, it would be 15.5, and that would be equal to 20 as an integer. The third one is incorrect because the input function after this one. So after the input function is always going to be a string. So if you do the string plus 5, it's not going to be equal to 20. And same applies if you do a string plus 5, it's not going to be equal to 20. So let me explain 30. So of the correct answers, we're basically looking for this first word or these first set of characters in this larger string. And so since R, lowercase r, is in the word Durga, this is going to be true. And since the lowercase is is a part of this is a fake news, it's also going to be correct. And you might think this one is a little confusing because the is in the sentence is capital. But we can see that there's also a lower s as a part of the first word. So thi, there's also an is there. Let me also explain the wrong answers. So the second option is wrong because remember that these boxes have the same objects in them, but they're not. So this is going to be equal to false. X is Y is false. But in this one, we have A equals 45 and B. Now this one is a little different because they're both equal to an int. And it's a little different because they are both pointing to the same object. So this one would actually be equal to false because they are pointing to the same object. So how should I explain this? So is basically the box analogy that I talked about really only applies to like lists and strings and things that don't point to the same object. Does that kind of make sense? So 45 is the same object as 45 and 45 are identical. So the two are actually going to be equal to each other. And the last one is incorrect because obviously the S1 is just the Python course, and S2 is going to be that but uppercase, and so the two are not going to be the same. Okay, next we have 35, and x is equal to 2, y is equal to 6, x is equal to x is equal to x plus 2 to the power of 3, and then we have this. So first let's do line 3, and that means x is equal to x plus 2 to the power of 3, and 2 to the power of 3 is 8, which is going to be equal to 2 plus 8 is equal to 10. Two plus 10. And so the fourth line, it's a little grayed out, but if you zoom in like that, you can see it. And that equal to x is equal to x slash slash y slash 2 slash slash 3. And so let's calculate this grayed out portion. So 6 slash slash 2 is going to be 3, because 6 divided by 2 is 3. And then we have 3 divided by 3, which basically, and this means that x is equal to x divided by 1. I'm so sorry. So x is equal to x divided by 1, which means that the value is not going to change. So the answer is, I'll explain it one more time. So x, y is equal to 6, x is equal to x plus 2 to the power of 3, which basically means x is equal to 2 plus 8. And then the fourth line says x is equal to 10 divided by 6 divided by 2 divided by 3. And 6 divided by 2 is 3. 3 divided by 3 is 1. So 10 divided by 1 is equal to 10. Next, this one is asking for which line of code we should write for to accept an input from the user and print that information. And as you can see here, in the third line, we're printing out a variable name, and that implies that we need to make a name variable. So immediately we can take out first and the last options because no variable is being made there. And the third option is correct because we're getting the variable name is name, and we're making it equal to the user's input. And remember that to use the input function, you need to have the parentheses. And so the second option is correct because we don't have the parentheses after the input. Next, we have of code will assign TT to the console. And so remember that the first index number is always 0. So 0, E is 1, X is 2, and T is 3. The correct answer is the third option because X0 is the first letter of X, which is T. And we also use negative in this. And so negative indexing means that we're just accessing elements not from the beginning to end, but from the end to beginning. And X negative 1 basically means that we're getting the very last letter in the word. So that means that we're getting the very first and the very last elements. And that is TT. The first option is wrong because there is no. The second option is wrong because the letter at index 2 is actually X, so that would print out TX. And the last option is wrong because the letter at index 1, so it would be EE. So the correct answer is the third option. Then we have the next question, which says, if the user 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 as input, which of the following code will print out 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6? So the first option is correct because we're getting input and then we're converting it, we're casting it as an integer. So count is going to be the integer form of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And how 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 plus 1, which is going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And the second option is also correct because remember that the eval function turns the string into its original data type. So since 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 is an integer, after the input, it will convert the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 back into an integer, and it'll work the same way as option 1. The third option is incorrect because remember that the input function will always be equal to a string. And so if we add, so count one, I'm so sorry. So count will be equal to a string value. And so if we do a string value plus 1, that's not going to be equal to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And the last option is also correct because we're casting the count variable as an integer towards the end. And so even though the first line is going to be a string, we're casting that string into an integer 1 to it, which means that we get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Lastly, we have, not lastly, next we have to find the result given the command invocation. So remember that the first element in an argv array is going to be test.py. That is going to be index 0, 10 is going to be index 1, and 20 is going to be index 2. And so we're trying to print out the element at index 1 and index 2, and index 1 is 10 and index 2 is 20. And you might think we're adding them together to get 30, but remember that the argv array or list is going to be strings. So since we're the 10 string and the 20 string, by adding them, we're just attaching it would be 10, 20. The second option would be correct. And I think the other teacher will also explain a bit more about that as well right after this. So the last question is, what is the type of x plus y? And the correct answer is a string because both of the variables are strings. And so x is equal to a string and the y is equal to string. And so when we use the plus operator between two strings, attaching the two together, and the result type is always going to be a string. So that was it for Python 2. I'm going to stop sharing, and then I think the other teacher will sort of explain more about the ARGV and SYS.
Yeah, so the other teacher is me, so I'll start sharing my screen. Just give me one second. Okay. All right, so yeah, I believe there was like question 8 or something. Yeah, this one, right? So if I zoom in some more, the question was basically asking like which of the following command, yeah, will generate that output, right? So like yeah, you might notice that there's some argv and yeah, that. So right. So basically what argv is that It's kind of like a custom array that you put into your Python through like commands and stuff. All right, so the first one is usually you always start off with py because when you have like, for example, like a command prompt as shown here, if I want to do something in Python, I would usually start my commands with py to like denote that it's like a Python command. So that's why all of these answer choices have like a py in front, and then basically with any argument, or I guess argv array, there's always like two components. The first component is of the file, which is test.py. So that always takes up the first slot, which I'll show in a bit. And then the second part is like base rest of the array. So in this case, it will be 10, 20, 30, or sorry, Durga 10, 20, 30. So if I show this in Visual Studio Code, so as you can see here, I have already copy pasted the problem into here as just like an. So essentially, sorry, how to explain this. So the first thing that you need to do is that you need to like run the command file, right? You need to somehow run. Oh, there's no highlight, but like you need to somehow run this py test.py Durga 10. So in order to do that, since for Visual Studio to like do it on the terminal, the easier way to do it is just to hit run and debug, which is this button over here. So there's like the normal run button, and then there's like a little like spider next to it. So yeah, just go ahead and click that. When I first did this, there was like some kind of pop-up where it's like asking, do you want to debug the file or something? Just hit yes, or whatever the big is. And then here, yeah, so here we want to run the Python current file. So again, since I already did this, it's not popping up anymore, but essentially there should be like a search bar in the top where it's like asking you like what kind of like debugging do you want to do. First one, which should be like Python current file. So click that one, and then now you should like kind of where I am, like this. And then essentially when we want to start debugging, we want to, oh, it's not popping up, but yeah, we need to like make this launch.json file. So actually, it might be better if I just create a new file. Give me 1 second. So I'm gonna just show it step by step. So I'll create a new file, I guess test2.py. And basically I'll just copy paste the code from test. And then, so yeah, when I run and debug this, yeah, basically I should be able to hit the green button over here, and yeah, it should essentially run it. How do you get the, oh, okay. So if you click the gear in this like top right corner of this specific section, you should get something called like launch.json or something. Launch.json is where you can like actually type in the commands. So if you first open the file for the first time, it might look like this. In order to add in your argv command, right? We enter something called, like, we'll enter the args with like a string, and then we'll do a colon and then an array, right? So the array would basically just have all of the arguments that we want to the code. So that would be basically anything after the name of the file, because so for example, in this example, it would just be Durga 10, because those are the arguments. Test.py is just the name of the file, so that's not considered part of the arguments. So we add the args into over here like this, and after that, we basically just run the code from here. But to show you what the arg file looks like, I'm gonna just print out argv, and then we'll run this with debugging so we can use the command file. So yeah, it looks a little messy, but I will zoom in. Yeah, so essentially, if you look at this very bottom one, because that's the current run, this is like your arguments array, and this very first part, that's like the name of the, or to be more specific, that's like the location of the. So here, since my file is not like just like in desktop, it's like under some folders. That's why it's a lot more complicated than say this one, where it's just test.py. Because this one, like this specific, like a lot of folders. So that's why there's so many like names and things like that. After the file name, is like the rest of the arguments, like Durga 10. So the reason why I know some people were having questions about this, but like the reason why we start at 2 is because technically speaking, oh, where'd it go? Oh, okay, yeah. Technically speaking, the name of the file is element 0. So when you go back to JSON, if you look at the args, right? If you look at just the args, it might look like Durga is 0 and 0 because like it's the first one in the array, right? But what they don't show is the name of the file. That's technically element 0. So for this argument array specifically, Durga is actually element 1. And this would then be element 2, and then 3, and then 4. So just for args, because you don't show the name of the file, just for this array, technically speaking, you kind of start at 1. Also, yeah, so that's the reason why you have this for loop this for loop starting at 2, because the numbers start at. And then just to clarify some other thing, this 0 thing, that's just part of string format, so that would just correspond to argv1, which as I've said before was Durga. So that's why it says the average for Durga is 20. This other one, that's of course the other, and that's just the average. So yeah, you would get output for this problem. I guess, are there any questions for this one? I don't see anything, but let me know if you have anything. So I guess I'll just move on. So I believe there was another question. Yeah, something like this, where it's like, consider the code, and again, you're given another command, and then you want to find a result. So for I believe the answer should be 1020. Correct me if I'm wrong, but the reason why is because when you pass in the arguments, one thing I forgot, all of these need to be strings. So as you can see, 10, 20, 30, they're all in strings. If I put out the quotation marks from 10, in, you can see that there's like a incorrect type expected string or something. Yeah, so basically all of these are implicitly strings. Even so, in like when you write in the command, these may not look like strings, right? But implicitly they are strings because as we can see from the JSON file, we're inputting them as strings only. So these have to be strings. Like I said before, test.py, that's just the name of the file. So that's argv0. So then argv1 is there a way to draw on this? Hold on. Okay. So yeah, as I said before, so this would be element 0. and then this is 1, and this is 2. And then remember, there's like quotation marks around these that are just invisible. But technically speaking, the main point is that these are string 10s and string 20s, not integer 10s and integer 20s. So when I add these two strings together, I get 1020 because when you add together, you just like basically put them together, like concatenate them. So that's why the answer should be 10 for this one. I believe that's it. Am I missing something? But if I guess I'll pass it on to the next teacher. Unless there are any questions, of course.
Hello. Now we're going to go over the filtering problem, and we'll be going over one that we were not able to finish last time. So if you guys give me 1 second, I will send the link to the problem in the chat, and then you guys can open it. And I apologize in advance as my dog is kind of loud and he's barking now. So if you guys hear that, I'm sorry. Okay. So if you guys could just open up that link that I sent in the live lecture notes, and I will open it as well, and then I'll give you guys a few minutes. Everyone's on that link, and then we can go ahead and get started. Okay. If everyone is on the HackerRank page, then I will go ahead and get started. So going over this problem yesterday, but it's a collections.counter. So remember, we have our character named Ragu, and he's a shoe shop owner. And his shop has a number of shoes, right? And to sell these shoes to the customers. I'll just recap the problem really quickly, and then we can go ahead and get started on solving it. So, right, remember that we have some number of shoes, some number of customers, and the customers are willing to pay some amount of money to get the, and our job is to calculate how much money Ragu earned. Okay? So the first line, right, has X, right? So this is about our input, and we can see a sample input here. So the first line contains X, which is the number of shoes, right? So it says here that we have shoes. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And then the next line has the list containing each size of the shoe that he has in his shop. So a shoe of size 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8, 7, 6, 5, and 8, right? Remember that each number is basically just means that this is representing a shoe of size 5. So it's kind of like this is his inventory. So if we count, if we look here, we can see that there are 2 5s. So this means that we have 2 shoes that are of size 5 currently in our inventory. And then the next number, right? The next number is N, which is the number of customers. And so here we have that letter N. And then, that letter N means that we have 6 customers currently. And so we have 6 customers, and as you can see in the lines below, we can see that there are these 6 customers represented here. And then, so the first customer, right? If we look at the input format, it says that the next n lines contain the space-separated values of the shoe size desired by the customer and xi, which is the shoe. Okay, so basically, if we look, we can see that this is the shoe size that customer 1 wants, right? This is the first line after n, right? So customer 1 wants a 6 shoe and is willing to pay $55. And as you can tell, customer 2 wants a size 6 shoe and wants to pay $45. See, the shoes don't have a fixed price, and the price that's given here is just the price that they, I guess, the price that they want to pay. Okay. So yesterday I was not able to guys time to solve this problem, but today I'll give you guys around 7 minutes to solve this problem. And just remember that I'm not finished explaining it, but just remember to I guess try to code efficiently, fast, but at the same time don't compromise your I guess speed for your performance. And so let's look at since we looked at the input, right? We looked at it yesterday as well. So we know that, just to recap, right? We can sell these 2 shoes because we have 2 shoes of size 6, but we can't sell this one because we no longer have the size 6 in our inventory. And then we can sell this one, right? Because it's right here. And then we can sell this one. It's right here. We can sell this one because actually no, we can't. Sorry, this one because we don't have a size 10 shoe here. And so we remember that we sold this, we sold this, we sold this, and we sold this. So if you add up all the money, that's going to end up being 200. And so that's our output, right? That's the answer to the problem. And you can see that very explanation here. And if you guys have any questions, right, just let me know in the chat. Just obviously because I want to answer you guys might have before you guys begin programming, because it might be frustrating if you got questions while you guys are programming. And so that is basically the problem. So just remember the task at hand and the input format and the output format. And I will give you guys 6 minutes to program now. And if you guys have your HackerRank account set up, just remember that you can run your code and right. So this is the solution that we had so far from yesterday, and right, how you would test your code is by clicking run. Now, obviously, this solution is not complete, so it's gonna answer. But if you do get the right answer, it'll say correct, and then you can submit code. And what this does is it just tests your code against more cases. And then if you get all of those right, then that means that your code is good and problem. Okay, so because this problem is a little challenging, I'm just gonna go over the solution that I was going over yesterday. So if we look, right, we have our first line here, which is x, right? So remember that x is the shoes, and the number of shoes will be taken in with the input function, and then it will be casted into an int, right? Because the x is a number here. And then sizes, right? Sizes is gonna, I know this line is very complicated, so once, like I did yesterday, let's break it down. First, we've taken input.split, right? So we know that input is just taking in like input from the sample input, I guess, or the input here. So what we're doing is after we take in the first line, we take in the second line. Obviously, because this is a very long line, we're going to split it. And then automatically what this split function will do is split it by spaces. And then since now we have, you can basically think of it as like, this is one, I guess, like long piece of like meat. And then you're just chopping it up into small pieces. And then what we're doing is we're gonna, for all of these individual numbers, we're gonna make them into integers. That's what the map function does, is it goes through every single input, right? Or every single variable that, and then it runs a certain function. And so the function here in this, the int function, right? And int, because it's like you can cast with the word int, all it is doing is just casting every single thing here into an int, okay? The input.split, right, is just splitting it up, and it's holding it as an iterable data structure. And what that means is that we can just, and so for the map function, what you have to have is a function and then your iterable. What an iterable means is it's just something that you can go through. Like for example, I guess a good example of an iterable in real life is a drawer of a filing cabinet with a bunch of folders in it, because you can just go through the folders one by one, right? And so that's what this whole thing does. It just goes through all of these and then takes them as input and turns them into integers, right? And then the map just basically acts as a for loop and goes through all of these. And then what the list function does is it just takes all of these, right, that have been converted, and then it's going to make it into a list. And then it's going to store that list into sizes, okay? And then after that, what we're going to do is we're going to make a profit variable, and we're going to set it to 0. Now, we do this because obviously at the very beginning, we start out with 0 profit, right? Any money yet. So we start with 0. And then our other variable n, and it's equal to the cast of the input. So what this means is that we took in this line, we took in this line, now we're taking in this line, and this is going to be our n, right, which is the number of customers. And then so we're going to take that as input, and then we're going to cast it into an int so that it becomes a number and not a string. Okay? So now that you guys are up to speed, let's start to, I guess, let's start to for the remainder of the problem. So now what we're going to do is we're going to do a for loop. And what we're going to do is we're going to iterate through every single customer. So we're going to do for I in range. And then since we're going through our customers and the number of customers is n, we're going here so that we can go from 0 to 6, but obviously we're not going to include 6, so it's going to go 5 times. Or sorry, it's going to go from 0 to 5, which is 6 times. Apologies. So it would go 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then that's what range n does, right? Because it just goes from 0 to n minus 1. And here is 6, so it's going to go from 0 to 5, which is 6 numbers, and we have 6. If that's confusing, please let me know so that I can re-explain that. But that's what we're going to have for the range for our for loop. And so next, what we're going to do is we're going to take in the size and the price, okay? Because if we look here, right, we're going through 6 different inputs, right? And then for each one, we have and our price. So let's just keep it simple and let's put it as S and P. And I just want to make something clear. Because this, I guess, class will be recorded and uploaded to YouTube, I would suggest that instead of, if you guys are typing this out right now, I would suggest that instead of typing it out along with me, that you guys would just listen to the explanation, because obviously it's hard to do both at the same time. And I'd rather you guys fully understand and how to solve it before you guys actually attempt at solving it, okay? And so if we continue, right, we're trying to take in the size and the price of the shoe. So what we're going to do is, obviously, because these two are variables, we're going to equal to, and then we're going to call a map function. And remember, the map function, what it does is it takes in some input, right, some iterable, and then it runs a function through every variable that iterable. So think of it as like, obviously that it might be a little hard to grasp at first, but it's like if you have an assembly line, right? For example, let's say that you have an assembly line of toys, and you have a machine that paints the toys, right? So what happens is you have like a very, very, very large, let's say you have 200 toys, right? What the paint machine will do is, for each toy that the paint machine goes through, right, it's gonna paint the toy, and then it's gonna move on to the next, and it's gonna paint that toy, and it's gonna move on, right? So it does the same function for a bunch of things, right? That's what's happening here, and also here. So right now we're focusing here, right? So we take this in, and what we're gonna do is actually, just so that it's easier for you guys, I'll write the iterable. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this in as input, because that's how we take in our input in Python. And we're going to split it. And then that's going to, cut it up, right? And then what we're going to do is we're going to run the int function through each of them again, right? Like we did here. And then, so now we have S and P, and they are both ints, right? And then if S in sizes. So what this means is that if shoe size that we got right now is in our stock, right? Because S sizes is here. So we're just checking, is this in here right now? Right? That's what these ifs say. And then if it is, what we're going to do is we're going to do profit plus P. Okay? And we do this because what is we have our if S in sizes, right? So this is checking if the size just received from the customer is in our stock. And if it is, and we get our profit, right? Because we have to record our profit because that's our answer. And then we add P to it. And P is here. So this is the price that the customer is willing to pay. And so we add that to our profit because we've basically just successfully. Okay. And so moving on, right? We have, so we added to price to the profit. And then what we're going to do is we're going to do sizes dot remove S. Okay. And we do this because once we've sold, we want to make sure that we don't accidentally sell a shoe that we don't have. Okay. So we're going to do it. We're going to go in here and we're going to remove this. So just so that we know we already sold. And if you guys think about it, this is what's called a simulation problem. And so we're just simulating a shoe store, right? And so this is a very, very hard problem if you really understand it. And all we're doing is we're just simulating a shoe store. So we take our inventory here, we write down our initial, we take in the amount of customers, the amount of shoes that we have, and then we take the customer's orders, we see if we have. It's really, if you think about it, it's like actually like simulating how it's like to run the right. It's very simplified, but obviously it that way. And then the next line that we're gonna do, right? All we're gonna do is we're gonna just print out our profit. And obviously we're gonna do this because our profit is our answer here. Okay. Run code. And as you can see, we passed the sample case. So it says, congratulations, you passed the sample test cases. Click the submit button to run your code against all of the tests. So we'll click submit code. And it says fetching results. So we completed the challenge or the question, whatever you want to call it. And these are hidden cases, right? Therapist, just so that it's a little harder on you, because it's think about it like this way. It's like I guess it's I think having to it's kind of like having half of the answer in your hand already, because these test cases basically show what you're going up against. And so what's important in programming, which this is trying to simulate, is that you are able to beat these test cases that you don't know about. The whole point is that you're trying to make your, and so that's why they only give you this one test case, and you're expected to be able to, I guess, pass these other test cases without knowing exactly. Okay. So that's the collections.counter problem. And then now we're going to move on to the next problem, which I will send in the chat. If you guys just give me 1 second. So the problem link is in the live lecture notes. This is called Python. And I will give you guys just a minute to open up the problem on my screen as well. And then I'll just give you guys, a minute so that you guys can open it, and then I'll start. Okay, guys, so now we're going to go over the next problem called if else. And so the first thing we do, right, is read the task. In this type of programming, right, like I said, this is like programming. In this type of programming environment, it's important that we fully understand the problem before we even start to code. The time it takes to read and comprehend should actually take longer than the time it takes for you to program the entire. Because if you do it properly, then the programming is actually the easy part, and it's basically just like copying down the idea from your head into paper, and the comprehension is the difficult part because you're trying to, I guess, understand a new puzzle. And so let's try to comprehend the problem for this one. Guys, 1 second. I think there you go. Oh, sorry about that. So let's look at the task. Given an integer n, perform the following conditional actions. If n is odd, print weird. If n is even, and in the inclusive of 2 to 5, print not weird. If n is even, and in the inclusive range of 20, print weird. If n is my apologies. I think I actually went through this program for the first program that we did. If you guys have any questions about this, actually, please let me know in the question and answer. But I believe we actually already went over. So I'll add the problem we'll go over now. So this is arithmetic operators. So sorry about that. Okay. So so someone is asking me to repeat the if else problem. Yeah, I can definitely do that. Then I will go back to the if else problem here, and then I will re-explain it. I know the first time I went over this problem, we were a little bit short on time, so I wasn't able to. But so the task is we're given an integer n, and we have to perform the following conditional. Now this phrase might sound a little confusing, but all it means is just that we have to do certain depending on what we're given. So, for example, if n is we print weird. So if we're given a certain thing, then we do a certain thing, right? So this is one of the cases. If n is odd, print weird. If n is even and in the inclusive range of 2 to 5, print not weird. So this means that if n is 2, 3, 4, or 5, we print not weird. And if n is even and in the inclusive range of 6 to 20, print weird. So this means that if n is 6 to 20, right, including the numbers 20, then we print. If n is even and greater than 20, print not weird. So if it is 21 and greater, then not weird. So let's look at our input format for this problem. It just says a single line containing a positive integer n. Right? And depending on what n is, we're going to just run through all of these cases and we're going to determine what to do with that, I guess. We're going to determine what we're going to do with that integer, just depending on, it is. And the constraints are that n is anywhere from 1 to 100, right? And the output format is print weird if the number is weird, otherwise print weird. So we're given the cases and the rules for whether a number is weird or right. All we have to do is just run our program and make sure that it can tell which numbers are weird and which numbers are not weird. So let's analyze this sample input first, and let's see why the output is that way. Let's run through each of the cases, okay? So we're given equals 3, right? And what we're going to do is we're going to run it through the if n is odd, print weird. And so if is n odd? Yes, it is. 3 is an odd number, right? So we print weird, and that's why our n. But let's look at other cases and see why they're not true, okay? So right off the bat, if n is even, right? And 3 is not an even number. So the first requirement for all 3 of the rest of the case immediately just does not work, right? Because we have the word and here, we have to meet this case and we have to meet this requirement. So there are 2 requirements that we have to meet, absolutely, okay? And so because in this case, 3 is between 5, right? But it's even. So because one of these is wrong, right, this is not going to be the case that we go with. Okay? If anyone has any questions on that, please let me know once again. And then this one, it's not between 6 to 20, and it's not greater than 20. So obviously we're going to ignore both of these are for these cases. Okay? So the explanation is that n is 3, n is equal to 3, n is odd, so we print weird. It's pretty straightforward, right? For this problem, the second sample input, and so let's look at that. So our here is 24, okay? And our output is not weird. Let's look at why. So let's go through these one by one. Our n is 24, just remember that. If n is print weird, 24 is even, so right, we're not going to do this because it's not odd. If n is even, okay, so that's true, so that's a good start. And in the inclusive range of 2 to 5, right, 24 is not between 2 and 5, so we're going to skip this to the right. If n is even, that's true. And in the inclusive 6 to 20, that's not true because 24 is greater than 20, right? Print weird. So we're not going to print weird. And then if n greater than 20, right? So let's actually, sorry, let me back. So if n is even, right? 24 is even and greater than 20. 24 is greater than 20. And remember how I said both of the conditions need to be true if it's and all 3 of these are and. So because both of these are true, we're going to do this. So we're going to print not weird. And that's why we print not weird. And the explanation says the same thing. N equals 24, n is greater than 20, and n is even. These 2 are both true. So it is not weird. Okay? And I think that's all you really need to know for the so now I'm going to start solving the problem. For now, I'm just going to delete this. Let me just reset the code. And so we're given n, right? And that's really all we're given. Okay, we're supposed to, I guess, solve it just by being given n. Okay, and so really only have 2 cases, right? We have weird and not weird. So the first thing that we're going to try to do is we're going to try to just, I guess, group them up and just have one if statement and one, right? So I guess because weird is the priority here. Um, when I say priority, I just mean because weird is like on, and then not weird is like right. So it doesn't really matter, but let's just here for now. Just obviously, if you guys solve this on your own, do the as long as it's like as long as you just do not weird and write your code not weird, then it should work. But I'm gonna choose weird here, and I'm gonna write a statement. I'm gonna try to find what makes it, and just group all those. Okay, so let's see. So a number is automatically weird if it's odd, right. So let's do this. If n mod 2 equals 1, right? And then obviously we have more conditions, so we're gonna add here. Or actually, sorry. There's multiple, I guess, factors of what makes a number weird. And so this is just one of the things that can make a number weird. So the other thing, right, because it's really one or the other. Yeah, it's one or the other. Or it could be both. Because of that, we're going to use it. At least true. Okay. So the first condition is if n is odd, print weird. The second condition is if n is even and in the inclusive range, print weird. Okay. So what we're going to do is n in range 5, 21. And so because the range function is exclusive, right? We have to do one below 6 and one above 20. So because it's not going to include these numbers, it's going to include everything that's inside of them. So that's just going to be 6 to 20. And that's why we put 5 and 20, right? And so if n in mod 2 equals 1, or n in range 5, 21, then we'll print weird. Okay. What we'll do is, next, all we need to do is do else prints not weird. And we only need to do an else because we have all the weird cases covered. So everything not covered in this is automatically just not weird. And so that's why we print not. Okay. And so let's run our code. And so it looks like our sample case worked here. So let's submit our code. And it seems like our code worked against the other cases. Just to reiterate what I said, so this is checking for all the weird cases, right? So it's either n equals 1, which means n is odd, or n is in the range of 6 to 20. And this works because this is the only test case with 6 to 20, right? If this said if n is odd and in the inclusive, if there's another test case that's n is odd and in the inclusive range of, then I would have to make my code different. But because there's only one condition 6 to 20, I can simplify my code further and just make it 2 statements and just keep it like this. Why code works, right? Because we just check for everything that's weird first, and then everything else that isn't weird is automatically not weird. All we need to do is just else print not weird. And that is all there is to this problem. It's pretty straightforward, but if you guys have any questions, comments, about the problem, then just feel free to let me know. And that's all for today for hack problems. So I will stop sharing. And I will let the host take over.
Okay. I guess that's it for today. If you guys don't have any other questions, then you guys are free to leave, and we'll meet each other at the same time. Thank you, everyone. Bye.